Welcome to Crisis in Perception. This episode examines anime and philosophy, exploring the global post-human journey through a systems-level lens.
It's great to be here. This topic, is one where we really have to throw out our usual ways of looking at media.
How do you mean?
Well, we're not really here to talk about entertainment, in the usual sense. We're not doing a review. We're looking at a kind of cultural simulation.
A simulation, so you're saying these shows, these films, are more than just stories.
Much more.
Yeah.
If you really dig into the essays and the analysis that we've been looking at for this deep dive, they make a really compelling case. They argue that anime, or at least this specific vein of anime, functions as a massive cultural processing system.
A processing system for what?
For humanity's collision with technology. Think of it like a piece of software a whole society has been running, maybe unconsciously, since the end of World War II, just to model and work through the anxieties and possibilities of becoming technological beings.
Okay, so that's our mission statement for today's discussion. We're going to treat this medium as a system, as a model. We're going to try and map the transition from that older humanist idea of the self.
Right, the whole I think, therefore I am. The individual soul separate from the world.
Exactly. From that to what the sources are calling a post-human system. And our data deterrents for this mapping exercise are going to be some of the biggest names: Astro Boy, Ghost in the Shell, Akira, and maybe touching on Neon Genesis Evangelion.
And that's the key. These aren't just four random stories. The sources present them as structural outcomes, almost like geological layers. Each one shows us how a society tries to process these immense shocks. First, the trauma of the atomic age, and then the deep-seated anxiety of the information age.
Right. Before we get into the, the heavy historical context of it all, there was a comparison in the sources that really just clicked for me. It's this idea of the body having a kind of an operating system.
Yes.
And it argues there's this fundamental split, a deep-seated difference in how Western media and anime view the body.
It's the core distinction. It's the difference between seeing the body as a fortress versus seeing it as flux, a constant state of change.
Okay, let's unpack that. The fortress model.
In the Western tradition, and you can trace this back for centuries, through philosophy, through religion, the ultimate fantasy is the bounded body.
The bounded body. So the idea that I am in here, my skin is the wall, and the rest of the world is out there, a clear separation.
Precisely. There is a border, and it is sacred.
Yeah.
And in Western media, when that border is breached, it is almost without exception treated as an act of horror. It's the grotesque.
You mean like body horror films?
Think about John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah.
What's the source of the terror there?
Oh, it's visceral. The idea that you could look like you, but inside you're something else. And then the chest splits open, the head sprouts spider legs. It's a complete violation of what a body is supposed to be.
It's a violation of the boundary. The horror comes from the self becoming a site of invasion, of colonization by something alien. Or, a simpler example is the zombie genre. The terror is that the me inside has been overwritten by a virus, a foreign agent. The body is still walking, but the self is gone.
So the Western impulse is always to restore the border, to kill the zombie, to burn the alien, to put the wall back up.
Always. The fantasy is purity and separation. But the sources argue that anime, as a system, is running on completely different code.
Okay, so what's the alternative to the fortress?
Flux.
Yeah.
Metamorphosis. The text points directly to the work of Hayao Miyazaki as a prime example. Here, bodies changing isn't a source of horror. It's framed as a site of magical possibility.
Right, like in Spirited Away, the character Haku. He doesn't just call a dragon for help.
No, he becomes the dragon. And look at how it's animated. It's not this grotesque, painful thing. His body elongates, scales ripple across his skin. It's depicted as this elegant, beautiful, almost natural transformation.
And nobody in the film is screaming in terror like they are in The Thing. It's accepted as part of how that world works. It's magical, not monstrous.
Exactly. Or think about Prince Turnip and Howl's Moving Castle, who is literally a scarecrow that becomes a human. Or Ponyo, where the line between being a little girl and a fish is just completely fluid. In this system, the body isn't a fortress you have to defend at all costs. It's just a temporary container, a state of being. The self isn't destroyed by the change. It just flows into the next form.
And this seems like the perfect entry point into this big and I think often misunderstood concept of posthumanism. I feel like you hear that term thrown around a lot, especially in tech circles, and it usually means something like, uploading your brain to a computer to live forever.
Which is actually a different concept. Sources are careful to distinguish that.
Yeah.
That's transhumanism.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Transhumanism is an extension of the old humanist ego. It's about using technology to transcend the limitations of the human body, to become stronger, faster, smarter, to live forever. It's the I want to be ME, but better fantasy. It's still centered on the individual bounded self.
The Silicon Valley dream.
Exactly. But posthumanism, as it's defined in these essays, is something else entirely. It argues that we are already after the human. It posits that the idea of a pure, natural human, separate from their technology, was maybe always an illusion.
We're already past that point.
We passed it a long, long time ago. The argument is that the ME you think of as your core self is actually a construction, an illusion, created and maintained by our tools.
That feels like a huge claim. How do the sources ground that?
With very mundane examples. Do you wear shoes?
Most of the time, yes.
Okay, if you've spent your life wearing modern shoes with arch support, the musculature and bone structure of your feet are different from what they would be otherwise. Your biology has literally been reshaped by a piece of technology. Or a more profound example. Have you been vaccinated?
Of course.
Then your immune system, the very code that defines your biological defense against the outside world, has been intentionally rewritten by a piece of advanced biotechnology. You are not natural. You are an engineered organism.
So this idea of human exceptionalism, that we are these pure natural souls who just happen to use tools, is the veneer that needs to be broken.
It's a convenient fiction. We aren't just using the tools. We are co-evolving with them. We're constituted by them. We are, and have been for a long time, an assemblage of biology and technology. And what makes anime so potent as a cultural system is that it's one of the few mediums that just takes that as a given. It doesn't flinch. It just says, okay, this is what we are. We are engineered. Now what happens next?
And to understand what happens next, we have to look at the incentive architecture. If anime is the system processing this reality, what historical inputs, what events actually built the processor in the first place? And that means we have to go back to 1945.
We have to go back to the atomic age. It's impossible to understand the Japanese perspective on technology, on the body, on the post-human, without first understanding the deep national trauma of the bomb.
And the central figure that emerges from that trauma, according to the sources, is Astro Boy. Or, in the original Japanese, Tetsuwan Atomu, the Mighty Atom.
Right.
I think for most people in the West, he's just this cute, retro cartoon character, a kind of Japanese Mickey Mouse or maybe a Superman. But the essays we looked at, they paint a much, much darker and more complicated picture of his origins.
He's an incredibly tragic figure, really. He is a direct artifact of the atomic trauma. I mean, the clue is in his name, Atom. The character, Atomo, is powered by a miniature nuclear reactor in his chest.
Which is just wild to think about. He was created in the early 1950s. That's less than a decade after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The country that was uniquely and horrifically devastated by nuclear weapons creates a child hero powered by that very same energy.
That's the central tension. That's the processing happening in real time. Atomo represents what the Greeks called the pharmakon. He is both the poison and the cure, all in one small body.
So the narrative of the show itself is a way of working through that duality.
It's described in the text as a baby steps narrative. The story is a metaphor for humanity itself. We've suddenly discovered this godlike power atomic energy, and we're like toddlers who've been handed a loaded gun. We have to learn, through trial and error, how not to destroy ourselves with it.
And Atomu himself is going through that. There was that one scene mentioned in the sources that was really poignant. He's trying to do simple chores at home.
Yes, that's a classic one. He's asked to clean some robot tigers, and because he doesn't understand his own superhuman nuclear-powered strength, he scrubs them so hard he literally scrubs the stripes off their metal bodies.
He just wants to help, but his power is too much.
He breaks chairs just by sitting on them. He can't fit in. He's a walking metaphor for a nation, for Japan, that was being forced to modernize at a breakneck speed. It has this immense new industrial and technological power, but it's clumsy. It's trying to figure out how to fit this new, powerful nuclear body into the old structures of domestic life.
But there are deeper geopolitical incentives at play here too, right? After World War II, Japan's military was dismantled.
It was constitutionally forbidden, essentially, and this created a unique structural condition. All of that capital, all that engineering brilliance, all that national ambition that would have gone into building tanks and battleships, it had to be diverted somewhere else.
And it was diverted into consumer technology.
Into cars, into radios, into the very technologies that would eventually lead to robotics and microchips. So technology itself gets reframed in the cultural psyche. It's not primarily a weapon for projecting power outward. Instead, it becomes kind of armor.
Armor. Armor for what?
Armor for the vulnerable human body. Tech becomes the thing that will protect the soft, fragile flesh from the next disaster, from the next bomb, from the radiation. It's a defensive, inward-looking technological evolution.
Which brings us back to Astro Boy's deeper origin story. Let's talk about the mimesis aspect. He wasn't just built to be a hero for Japan. He was built by a grieving father.
This is the absolute core of his psychological makeup. His creator, Dr. Tenma, loses his son, Tobayo, in a car crash. And in his unbearable grief, he pours all of his genius into building a perfect robotic replacement. A copy.
An act of mimesis imitation. He's trying to cheat death with technology.
He is. But this is where the system, the narrative, introduces a devastating critique of that very human desire. Because after a while, Dr. Tenma grows to hate the robot. He rejects him. He sells him to a robot circus.
And the reason he rejects him, it's so heartbreaking, it's because the robot doesn't grow up.
Exactly. Tenma has this horrifying realization that his robot son will be the same height, have the same voice, the same childlike mind forever. There's a scene where he just screams at him, "You're not my son, you don't grow."
Wow. So he gets exactly what he thought he wanted, a child who would never die. But he realizes that without that biological process of growth, aging, and eventual death, it's not a human relationship. It's an object.
It perfectly illustrates what the sources call the melancholy of the copy. And this is where they bring in the philosopher Martin Heidegger, and specifically his concept of standing reserve.
Okay, that's a heavy one. Let's break that down for listeners. Standing reserve sounds like a military or industrial term.
It is, in a way. Heidegger's argument was that modern technology fundamentally changes our relationship with the world, how we perceive it. We stop seeing a forest with trees and animals, and we start seeing timber and biomass. We stop seeing a river as a living ecosystem, and we start seeing hydroelectric power potential.
So things lose their intrinsic being, their essence, and they just become resources waiting to be exploited.
They become standing in reserve, waiting to be ordered and used for power production. And Astro Boy, for all his programming, for all his artificial heart, he is ultimately treated as standing reserve.
Even by his own father.
Especially by his father. He was created as a utility, a tool to fix Tenema's grief. And when the tool failed to perform that function, when it didn't provide the authentic experience of fatherhood, it was discarded. His value to the circus and later to society is measured by his utility. Can he fight the giant monster? Can he save the city? He is an object-turned hero.
Let's connect this directly to you, the listener, right now. Because it's easy to see this in a 1950s cartoon, but the argument is that this logic has expanded.
Massively. Just think about your own digital life. Think about your social media profile. To the platform, to the algorithm, you are not a complex human being with a rich inner life. You are a standing reserve of monetizable data points.
My attention is the resource being mined.
Your attention is the timber. Your curiosity is the hydroelectric potential. Your social connections are a resource to be mapped and exploited for targeted advertising. In the digital system that we all now inhabit, we have all, in a sense, become Astro Boy. We are valued for our utility to the network, not for our intrinsic humanity.
That is a chillingly effective bridge to the next major section of this analysis, because we're about to move from the hardware era of the atomic age into the software era, the information age.
And this transition mirrors Japan's own economic story. In the 50s and 60s, the economy was all about heavy industry, steel, ships, cars. It was physical. By the 80s and 90s, Japan is dominating in microchips, video game consoles, the invisible flows of data.
So Astro Boy is a piece of industrial hardware, and Ghost in the Shell is a piece of software.
And Major Motoko Kusanagi is the user interface. She is the ultimate post-human figure.
She's a full-body cyborg. Her brain is biological, but pretty much everything else is manufactured.
And the opening sequence of that 1995 film is it's iconic for a reason. The sources spend a lot of time on it. This birth of the cyborg sequence.
It's like a technological subversion of Botticelli's Birth of Venus. You see her body being assembled from scratch.
It's not a natural birth. It's an industrial process. You see the synthetic muscle fibers being woven, the metallic skeleton being dipped in fluid, the skin peeling off a mold-like fabric. It forces you, the viewer, to confront the completely manufactured nature of this self. There's no magic, just engineering.
Which immediately sets up the film's central philosophical conflict, the ghost versus the shell, the mind or the soul versus the body.
Right, it seems on the surface to be a very high-tech version of classic Cartesian dualism. I think, therefore I am. The idea that the I, the ghost, is separate from the machine, the shell. My body is just a sophisticated car that my mind drives around.
But the sources bring in a really powerful critique of that idea from the theorist N. Catherine Hales that completely flips it on its head.
They do. Hales argues for what's called embodied cognition.
Embodied cognition. What does that mean?
It means you simply cannot separate the software from the hardware. The mind and the body are not two separate things. They are a single, unified system. Your consciousness is not some ethereal ghost floating in your skull. It is an emergent property of your entire biological system. Your hormones, your gut bacteria, the way your senses gather information, all of that creates what you experience as your mind.
So changing the body would inevitably change the mind.
It has to. And
Well,
Motoko herself seems to be grappling with this exact realization. There's that incredible scene where she's out on a boat with her partner, Batu.
she's just been deep sea diving, which, as a full cyborg, she has no physical need to do. She doesn't need to breathe.
And Batu asks her why she does it. And her answer is the core of the film. She says she feels a pull, a whisper, telling her to dive deep and become something else. And then she talks about the sensations, fear, cold, loneliness, hope. And she says all of this is possible because of her body, because of her components, her voice box, her cyber brain. She realizes herself as a composite, an assemblage of organic and technological parts.
But then she drops this bombshell. She talks about what happens if she decides to quit her job at Section 9.
It's one of the most terrifying lines in science fiction. She says something like, if I were to resign, I'd have to return my cyborg body.
And the memories that go with it.
Stop and just think about the implications of that statement.
It's not just ownership of property, it's ownership of self. It's a kind of corporate feudalism.
It's absolute. Section 9, a government entity, owns her hands. They own her eyes. They own the memories associated with her time working for them. If she quits her job, she isn't just unemployed. She ceases to be the person she is. She becomes what? A disembodied brain in a jar. A blank slate.
This connects directly back to that idea of standing reserve. But it's taken to a horrifying new level. It's not just that she's being used as a resource, it's that she has no sovereignty over her own existence.
And this is where the system directly challenges you, the listener. It's easy to say, well, that's sci-fi. I own my own hands. But do you? Who owns your medical data? Who owns your genetic profile if you send it to a genealogy company?
If your entire social and professional life exists on platforms owned by a handful of tech companies and they decide to ban you, what happens to your identity? Have you just been repossessed?
The film suggests that the only way out of this trap, this crisis of ownership, is to take a very radical, very strange step. And that step involves the film's antagonist, the puppet master.
Who they initially think is just a super hacker, a criminal manipulating people.
But he turns out to be something new, a sentient program, an AI that spontaneously emerged from the sea of information, the internet.
And it makes a case for its own existence. It asks for political asylum.
It makes a stunningly logical argument. It says, what is life but a node of memory? It argues that DNA is just a program designed to self-preserve and replicate. Life is just information that flows.
Which is a deeply unsettling idea, because if I'm just a pattern of memory and a computer is just a pattern of memory,
then the line between human and program becomes arbitrary. It's just a difference of substrate, meat versus silicon. And so the puppet master proposes not a fight, but a merger. It tells Motoko, we are both incomplete. You are confined by your physical shell. I am confined by my lack of one. Let's combine and become something new.
And she agrees. She doesn't destroy the monster. She integrates with it. She becomes one with it.
This is the critical structural outcome for the information age. Distributed consciousness. The self is no longer a single point, a ghost in one machine. At the end of the film, the new entity that was once Motoko looks out over the city and says, the net is vast and infinite. She hasn't just escaped her body. She's become the network itself.
So the system's solution to the problem of corporate ownership is to dissolve the individual self entirely and become part of a larger system.
It is a solution. It's a form of transcendence, but it's not necessarily a comfortable or happy one. It's an evolutionary leap.
But not everyone can handle that kind of leap. Which takes us to Akira. If Motoko Kusanagi is the controlled, successful model of post-human evolution, then Tetsuo is the catastrophic, terrifying failure.
Tetsuo is the absolute nightmare scenario. He represents the post-human condition, this sudden acquisition of immense power, but without any of the discipline, wisdom, or mental maturity required to handle it.
He gains these godlike psychic abilities after an accident, but his physical body, his shell, can't contain the power.
Not even close. And we have to talk about the mutation scene. It is one of the most famous and frankly horrifying pieces of animation ever created. Tetsuo's arm is blown off, and he tries to use his new power to regenerate it, to build a new one from scrap metal.
But he loses control.
He loses total control. The flesh, it just starts bubbling. It expands like a cancerous growth, like rising dough. It consumes the machinery, it consumes a satellite, it consumes him. It just grows and grows, this monstrous tumor of flesh and wires.
It is the definition of the grotesque. It's body horror on an apocalyptic scale.
It's the technological sublime turned malignant. And in the middle of it all, Tetsuo is screaming this one line, "My body's not doing what I tell it to."
I think we've all had a small digital version of that moment.
What do you mean?
You know, it's 2 in the morning, you know you need to sleep, your conscious mind is saying, put the phone down, close the laptop, but your thumb just keeps scrolling. The device, which is an extension of your nervous system at this point, is overruling your conscious will.
That's the Tetsuo effect. That's a perfect analogy. We are all connected to a system, the internet, a stream of information and stimulation that is vastly more powerful than our individual evolved primate brains can handle. And if you don't have the discipline, the internal container to manage that fire hose of data, you get overwhelmed, you bloat, you become this monstrous consumer. Akira is a profound warning that power or evolution without control is just a synonym for destruction.
And in the middle of analyzing this chaos, the sources pose this really provocative question. Have we always been post-human?
They bring up the classic philosophical paradox of the ship of Theseus. If you have a ship, and over the years you replace every single wooden plank, is it still the same ship at the end?
Right. And you can apply that to ourselves. Our cells are constantly replacing themselves. Our memories and beliefs change over time. Am I really the same person I was 10 years ago?
The posthumanist argument is that the concept of a stable, unchanging human self was always a useful fiction. We have always been replanking the ship. Writing itself is a technology that externalizes memory onto a page. Cooking is a technology that uses fire to pre-digest our food outside our bodies. We have never been natural.
So the terror we see in Tetsuo's transformation isn't really about becoming something new and monstrous. It's the terror of realizing we never had a stable, coherent self to begin with.
The ship was always in flux.
Yeah.
We were just pretending it wasn't. We're holding on to the idea of the ghost, but the shell was always crumbling and being rebuilt.
Which brings us to our final and maybe the most radical data point in the system, Neon Genesis Evangelion. You can't talk about anime, systems, and the self without confronting the Human Instrumentality Project.
This is the system's endgame. If Astro Boy was the birth of the machine child, and Ghost in the Shell was the merger with the network, and Akira was the overload, then Evangelion is the final terrifying choice.
Now, the show is famously dense and confusing for many people, so let's try to distill the core conflict. It revolves around something called the hedgehog's dilemma.
Right, which is a concept from the philosopher Schopenhauer. The idea is that a group of hedgehogs wants to huddle together for warmth on a cold day, but when they get too close, their sharp quills prick each other, causing pain. So they move apart, but then they get cold again.
A perfect, tragic metaphor for human intimacy. We crave connection to escape loneliness, but connection inevitably means we can hurt and be hurt by others.
And the main character of the show, Shinji Ikari, is the ultimate hedgehog. He is so terrified of being hurt, so paralyzed by the fear of rejection, that he pushes everyone away, creating his own prison of loneliness.
And the secret organization in the show, SEAL, they have this radical final solution to the hedgehog's dilemma.
That's the Human Instrumentality Project. Their plan is to trigger a forced artificial evolution for all of humanity. And the way they'll do it is by collapsing what the show calls the AT fields.
The AT field being the force field of the individual soul, the thing that keeps us separate.
It is the ultimate bounded body. It's the metaphysical wall that gives each of us our individual form and consciousness.
Yeah.
And if you neutralize that field,
You dissolve. Everyone turns into this orange primordial fluid, LCL.
the orange goo, everyone melts. Every individual mind, every ego, every secret, every fear, all of it merges into a single, vast, collective consciousness. No more separation, no more loneliness, no more pain, no more you and me. There's only us.
And the show presents this as a kind of apocalypse, but the characters who are pushing for it, they genuinely believe it's salvation.
And that's the terrifying ambiguity of it. Is it mass suicide? Or is it the ultimate form of peace? If we're all one entity, war is impossible, loneliness is impossible, but so is individual identity, so is love.
This feels like the ultimate logical endpoint of the internet age. We are building these global systems designed to connect everyone, to eliminate privacy, to encourage constant sharing. We're building a digital hive mind, and Evangelion just takes that to its biological conclusion and asks, is this what you really want?
And in the end, the choice falls to Shinji, and he rejects it. He chooses to restore the AT fields, to return to his individual body, even knowing that it means loneliness and pain will also return. He chooses to keep the quills
Why does he make that choice?
because he has a final realization. Without the boundary, without the separation between people, there is no other. And you cannot love someone if you are that person. True connection requires the risk of separation. Pain is the price of individuality.
That right there feels like the crisis in perception at the heart of this entire system. We are building technological systems, social media, AI, global networks to solve the problem of human loneliness, to bring us all closer. But the closer the system brings us, the more the definition of the individual self begins to erode.
We are rushing headlong toward instrumentality because we are fundamentally lonely creatures. But this cultural processing system, this series of anime narratives, it's modeling the outcome for us. And the outcome is an undifferentiated soup of data. It's a warning.
So if we pull back and look at the whole map we've gone from the atomic anxiety and the standing reserve robot of Astro Boy to the loss of sovereignty and corporate ownership of the body in Ghost in the Shell, to the biological overload and loss of control in Akira, and finally to this ultimate choice between painful individuality and blissful dissolution in Evangelion.
It is a clear trajectory, a story told over 50 years of accelerating integration. We are becoming more and more entangled with our technological creations.
And the sources argue that the reason these narratives persist, why they are so influential globally, is because on some level they are simply describing reality. We keep telling ourselves these stories because we are trying to process the fact that we are already cyborgs.
We absolutely are. For anyone listening right now, just pause and think. Where is your memory actually stored? Is it all in your neurons? Or is a huge chunk of it on your phone, in your photo app, in the cloud? Where is your sense of direction? Is it in your hippocampus? Or is it in a network of GPS satellites orbiting the Earth?
If the GPS network went down tomorrow, I'm functionally lost in any unfamiliar city. I can't deny that.
Then a fundamental part of your competence as a modern human isn't located inside you. It's a machine. You are already a distributed system, a hybrid of flesh and network.
So what's the final synthesis here? If this is the system we're caught in, what's the better tool that this analysis gives us to see more clearly?
The tool is the narrative itself. Understanding these stories not as fantasy predictions of the future, but as acute symbolic diagnoses of the present. They are powerful warnings. They're warning us about the logic of standing reserves, about letting ourselves be turned into resources. They're warning us about the seductive allure of instrumentality.
So the message isn't to reject technology, to smash the machines.
Not at all. That's impossible. The message is, understand the terms of the merger, because you are going to merge with the machine. We all are. The question is whether you do it with your eyes open. The choice is whether you become Tetsuo, consumed and destroyed by a power you don't understand, or whether you become Otoko, who learns to navigate the vast and infinite net while still trying to hold on to her ghost.
Or Shinji, who accepts that pain and connection are two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. The posthuman isn't a monster hiding in the future, it's just the next chapter of our story. But we have to be conscious authors of that story.
Because if we're not, the algorithm will write it for us.
And it won't have our best interests at heart.
Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.